in advanced planning is that this whole situation makes us forcefully projective. We might not want to be, we might want to use data and say, here's where the consumers were buying this, let's buy this tomorrow, but we really can't. We can't wait for regulations to change. We can't wait for consumers to tell us to change. We have to find proxy people that we feel like represent a likely future and design for their needs. So you see a lot of segmentation studies looking at different groups of people and saying, okay, we think these guys are probably going to be a little bit more progressive and likely to represent the kind of regulation that's coming in the next 5 to 10 years. Then we'll take a big scenario planning session, we'll generate potential strategies, we'll look for coverage. So we'll say this is the most aggressive regulatory situation, this is with high gas prices, this is with down economy. Then we'll do the same thing, say this is an up economy, these are lower regulations, and then if you start to see patterns where the vehicle or a vehicle opportunity starts popping up over and over and over, you know you've got something that you have to build. So that's where we'll go in and say, that's the red circle, say this is a common ground between all these potential futures, let's design for that. So that's kind of how we come up with our opportunity. The industry in general, though, I would say is ripe for social innovation. We talked about this. This is an energy grid proposal found in NPR. This is looking at regulatory negotiations today, as considered in the automotive industry, tend to be contentious and unfavorable, and people get very mad about it. And it's kind of an interpersonal negotiation that's more or less about if we regulate it so heavily that you can't do it otherwise, like we're going to kill you, we're going to give you so much of a fine, you cannot actually make cars, then the automotive industry goes, okay, let's change. So it's like we're at this very strange point in interpersonal negotiation that's not actually very healthy. We're not sitting around the table coming up with very long conversations about what we could do and how we could work together better. And I think this is changing. And I think electric vehicles in particular are forcing us to sit down at the table and talk about how these things are going to change. Because when we start talking about low CO2 and we start talking about high fuel efficiency, it's not something that we can take electric cars and just start selling them. So we've had to start working with states and working with cities and start talking about how exactly we're going to be rolling out electric vehicles in the future. I think we can take some inspiration from Social Innovation Review, which is a great quarterly review done by Stanton University. And I know Jim Collins is speaking at this conference, but he also wrote a book called Social Sectors. And he takes all of his applications from good to great, and he looks at how those work within social sectors, which is another interesting way to think about it. So I think public policy and private industry are really going to have to start dealing with some of these issues. The more and more complicated these timelines get, and the more and more of a collision we start to face. But from a consumer perspective, we could sit there and optimize, our industry and our electric grid all day, but they're sitting here going, okay, this car doesn't have an iPod input. Are you kidding me? So they are on a completely different playing field with what they think is coming and why. And so it's really about context and where the consumer's context is coming from and how they assign value. And so whatever context we're living in America shifts the relative value that we assign to products. So it's interesting when you think about couches versus car interiors. And $1,000 premium in a couch feels like a lot. Like buying a leather couch and buying a microfiber couch is a totally different buying experience than going to a car dealer and opting for leather. So it's a $1,000 difference in either situation, but for some reason the relative value within those product categories is extraordinarily different. And so this is why we tend to go to focus groups. We say, okay, we'll ask people how much money they're willing to pay for leather and when, right? And then we go to the focus group and people look at all the different leather packages and look at all the different trim packages and say, I think I'm going to pay $1,500. But the reality is when they actually go to buy a car, they're probably sitting in a coffee shop with one of their best friends, they're opening up a laptop, they're going through all the different vehicles that they found last week, and they're thinking of other stuff. They're thinking of the history of their family and what their parents drove. They're thinking of the kayak trip that they're going to take next summer and whether or not they're going to be able to fit all their gear. They're thinking about a romantic date and would they really want to drive this car that they're thinking about up to the valet and give them the keys and drop them, go off and have a romantic date and come home. They're also thinking about their grandkid that's on the way. And is he going to be able to ride in the back? And is this a very safe vehicle? And is this something that they're going to want to own for a number of years? And so these are the kind of reality situations that people start dreaming up when they start actually thinking about going to purchase a car. And I think part of the reason that this is specific to the automotive industry is because car purchases are big. They're expensive, they're long, they're arduous, And so people are always trying to make sure that what they do and what they buy is what they really want. Because I think going to the car dealership is a big step. People don't like it, it's painful. And so people don't like going to the dealership, they don't like dealing with it. So before they even get there, there's been so much conversation that's happened that it's hard to judge once they're there what they're actually going to buy. It's probably something that's slightly pre-decided by all of these different contextual discussions that they've had with their family and friends. And so this is why, when we look at automotive research, all these purchases fall into the same relative value bucket. We naturally compare things to one another to define relative value. So we say, okay, this is the Honda Civic, the Toyota Corolla, and the Nissan Sentra. They're all within the same segment. They're all really close to each other in price and therefore in feature. So they're going like, okay, well, so of these three, maybe the Civic's better because of this, maybe the Corolla's better because of this. But really, when we think about the exact same price, we could buy a Nissan Cube, and then we could also buy all of these other fun products. We could buy our KitchenAid, our KitchenAid blender that we really wanted. We could buy our black chandelier, our True Religion jeans, a Linda Loudermilk dress, a SIG, and an iPhone. So this is the same exact price bucket that you would buy one of these sedans for. But people don't think this way because we tend to avoid comparing things that are difficult to compare. So we tend to box things into the value group and say, of these vehicles that are in this group, this one's the best. Getting people to break out of this is very, very difficult, even if the things on the right are what they want even more than they want a car. Just people don't tend to think this way.